My name is Dr. Adrian Keller. I'm 52 years old, a particle physicist, and for most of my life I believed the universe was a machine without meaning. I had built my reputation dismantling mysteries. To me, every miracle was just a miscalculation waiting to be corrected. Every spark of wonder was a product of chemistry, probability, and perception. I used to say it all the time in interviews, on panels, in front of packed auditoriums of eager young minds. If you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. That phrase became my signature, my shield, and my pride. I wasn't just an atheist. I was an evangelist for the void. I'd spent 3 decades studying the quantum fabric of reality, those infinitesimal particles that appear and disappear in trillionths of a second. I told people consciousness itself was an accident of physics, a lucky glitch in entropy that somehow learned to dream. My office in Geneva looked more like a museum than a workplace. Awards lined the wall, Nobel nominations, global research grants, photographs of me shaking hands with men who shaped policy and budgets. I'd been on the cover of Scientific Mind and Nature World. I was the man who said the soul was a myth, and people applauded me for it. In public, I looked composed, confident, even charismatic. But in private, there was a quiet kind of hollowness that I never quite admitted to myself. My wife, Helena, was gentle and faithful, a woman who prayed before bed and whispered gratitude before meals. She'd smile softly when I teased her about her imaginary friend in the sky. She never argued back. She just said, "You'll understand someday." I hated that phrase. It sounded like superstition wrapped in patience. Our daughter Elise was 13 then. Every night before sleep, she would kneel beside her bed and pray that her father would believe. I'd stand at the door, amused, sometimes embarrassed, watching her lips move in the half-light. She thought she was saving me. I thought she was wasting her breath. I told myself I was happy, my marriage stable, my career untouchable, my theories shaping the way humanity understood existence itself. But something had started to stir inside me, a fatigue not of the body, but of the soul I claimed didn't exist. A sense that all our discoveries, all our equations, were just more elegant ways of describing ignorance. That spring I was leading the most ambitious experiment of my career. Beneath the Swiss mountains, in an underground complex humming with magnets and cryogenic chambers, we were preparing to do what many called impossible, to simulate the conditions of the universe's first second. The project was called Genesis 1. I'd told journalists it would reveal the mechanics of creation. What I didn't tell them was what I truly believed, that it would prove once and for all that there was no creator behind the creation. I had spent my whole life chasing particles of light, trying to catch the moment something became everything. I was certain that when we opened that window into the beginning of time, we would find nothing divine, only numbers, energy, and chaos. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. The lab was buried nearly 100 meters beneath the ground, a cathedral of steel and light, encircled by supercooled magnets that could bend atoms into pure energy. The air was sharp with the scent of ozone and liquid nitrogen. Monitors blinked with strings of data. Cameras rolled, recording history in the making. I stood behind the reinforced glass, watching my team run final checks. Each reactor segment was calibrated to fire in perfect synchronization, compressing matter and antimatter until they collided at near light speed. The goal? To observe what physicists called quantum vacuum collapse, the exact condition before reality decided to exist. It was the most powerful machine humanity had ever built. And on that day it became my coffin. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The reactors hummed like a heartbeat. The magnetic coils reached critical temperature. My palms were sweating, though I didn't know why. I'd done this 100 times before. This was just another test, another proof. Another day I'd walk away saying, "See? No God required." 3, 2, 1. The chamber lit up. A blinding pulse of blue light filled the observation room. At first, everything went according to plan. Energy spikes, wave patterns, beautiful symmetry on the graph. Then suddenly, alarms. One of the superconducting magnets failed to stabilize. A low vibration rippled through the floor, deep enough to feel in my bones. I shouted for the emergency cutoff, but before anyone could react, a flash. A sound like the tearing of the universe itself. Then, nothing. Absolute silence. For a moment I thought I had gone deaf. But it wasn't silence in the ordinary sense, it was absence. No hum, no air, no gravity. I was weightless. Suspended. The lab dissolved into static like a television losing signal, colors bleeding into white. And then, stillness. Far above me, on the monitors that would later be examined by panicked technicians, my vitals had flatlined. 5 minutes. 19 seconds. No pulse. But where I was, time had already stopped. And something else, something I'd spent my whole life denying, had just begun. The first thing I remember was motion. Not mine, theirs. I was hovering above a scene that shouldn't have been visible to me. My own body was lying on a gurney, chest bare, skin ashen, surrounded by frantic movement. The air was filled with the metallic rhythm of machines and the clipped urgency of human voices. Someone was shouting my name, "Dr. Keller, stay with us." Another counted aloud during compressions. My ribs rose and fell under the force of their hands. I should have felt pain. I should have felt anything. But I didn't. I watched, detached, curious. There was no fear. Only a strange fascination. So this is what it looks like when consciousness ends, I thought. My first instinct was to analyze it, to label it. Residual neurons firing, I told myself. A dying brain's dream. That was the rational explanation. That was the doctrine I had preached for decades. But something didn't fit. The room wasn't behaving like a memory or hallucination. I could see everything at once, not through eyes but through awareness. A 360-degree panorama of motion and light. I could see the nurse at the far corner fumbling for the crash cart. I could see my own face pale and slack, mouth half open. I could even read the small digital clock on the monitor behind me. 14 hours 27 minutes and 9 seconds. Time slowed to syrup and then, it stopped. In that frozen stillness, something impossible happened. I heard them, not their words but their thoughts. Fragmented bursts of emotion, as if their minds were speaking without mouths. Don't lose him. How is he still warm? Please breathe. I was inside their fear, their hope, their exhaustion, and I didn't have a body to contain it. My mind was functioning independently of the very organ I had claimed was its source. I was thinking, perceiving, remembering, yet the instrument of all those actions lay lifeless on the table. The first crack split through the foundation of everything I had believed. Consciousness was still happening, but the brain was gone. And in that realization, something deeper began to stir, an awareness beyond reason, pulling me away from the scene, drawing me somewhere I couldn't measure or define. The scientist in me whispered one final defense. This isn't real. But reality was already rewriting itself. The hospital faded like a projection losing power. The voices, the machines, the room, all dissolved into a silence so total it had texture. At first, I thought I had entered nothingness, the absolute oblivion I had always imagined followed death. No light, no body, no sound, just the endless absence I'd preached about for years. But then I noticed something I had no words for. The darkness was aware. It wasn't empty. It was listening, observing, waiting, and somehow it was aware of me. I couldn't see, yet I could perceive. I couldn't hear, yet I understood. My thoughts weren't echoing inside my head, they were being received. The deeper I drifted into that infinite quiet, the more it vibrated, like the air before a storm. Then I felt it, a subtle hum, not heard but felt in the core of whatever I had become. It started faint, like the distant vibration of a cello string, then grew, resonating through every layer of my being. The hum wasn't noise. It was communication. The darkness began to change. From within its depths, a soft illumination unfolded. Not a flash, not a burst, but a blooming. Like dawn rising from the inside out. The light wasn't invading the dark. The dark itself was transforming into light, as though awareness were becoming visible. And as that light touched me, something ancient, immense, and intelligent filled the space. There were no words, no language, yet a message formed within me, absolute and unmistakable. You have studied my shadows, it said, and called them truth. The sentence wasn't heard, it was known. Every molecule of pride, every formula I'd ever trusted, collapsed beneath the weight of that understanding. My entire life's work, the equations, the theories, the endless pursuit of what I called knowledge, had been a study of reflections, not reality. I had mistaken the echo for the voice. And now, the voice had finally spoken. The light swelled until it became everything. Not brightness as we know it, but a presence, alive, intelligent, infinite, and yet intimate enough to feel like it was surrounding me and existing within me at the same time. There was no shape, no face, no figure. And yet I knew, with the kind of certainty no human mind could fabricate, that I was standing before a consciousness that had no boundary. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. The communication was direct, thought to thought, essence to essence. Every question I had ever carried seemed to unfold within me before I could even form it. I felt seen, not as a man but as an entire lifetime all at once. Then, my memories began to rise from the depths like reflections projected on invisible glass. I saw myself as a boy, lying in the grass with my father, staring at the night sky for the first time. I remembered the wonder I had felt, the overwhelming sense that something vast and mysterious was breathing above me. That memory burned briefly, then dissolved into the image of a young man in a crowded university hall, lecturing on quantum mechanics, using mathematics to cage the unexplainable. I saw myself on television panels, smirking as I dismissed believers as deluded romantics clinging to superstition. I heard my own words echoing, "Faith is the refuge of those who fear the truth." And for the first time I felt the full weight of my arrogance. I braced for judgment, for condemnation. But what came instead was understanding. It felt like being examined by compassion itself. Not approval, not forgiveness, something deeper. An awareness that saw every flaw, every moment of pride and blindness, and held it with the tenderness of a teacher looking at a stubborn child. The voice, not sound but a knowing, filled the vastness around me. "Every equation you solved was a mirror," it said. "You were searching for me in numbers." The statement hit me like a wave of light. And suddenly I saw it. The patterns I had spent my life analyzing in subatomic behavior, quantum harmonics, wave collapses, golden ratios, were all reflections of the same divine architecture. The same ratios I'd seen in the orbital paths of planets appeared within the spirals of DNA, the whirls of fingerprints, even the thought patterns sparking across the human brain. Everything, every atom, every heartbeat, every star, was part of one living formula. The language of existence wasn't chaos. It was design. And I realized the cruel irony. I had spent my life dissecting the brushstrokes, while denying the painter. Then the light changed again. It drew back, revealing something so vast my mind could barely comprehend it. I was standing, if such a word still applied, inside what I can only describe as a quantum cathedral. It wasn't made of stone or matter, but of living energy. Beams of light wove themselves into pillars of geometry that extended endlessly upward and outward. Every line, every arc pulsed with rhythm, as though creation itself were breathing. It was both microscopic and infinite. I could see galaxies suspended like chandeliers, and within them, atoms swirling with the same divine symmetry. Every scale of reality reflected the same design, a lattice of life connecting all things from photons to souls. Each particle shimmered with awareness. I could feel them, billions of points of consciousness, vibrating in unison, held together by something that transcended physics. And in that instant I understood, the universe was not random. It was conscious. It wasn't a simulation. It wasn't mechanical. It was a mind. A mind expressing itself as light, form, and law. The voice spoke again, not stern, not distant, but solemn, as though it carried the ache of eternity. "When humanity learns to command light," it said, "it must also learn humility, or creation will correct itself." The words resonated through every fiber of my being. Images unfolded, flashes of human hands manipulating atomic fire, forging technology without wisdom, bending light and matter to will, while forgetting the source that made it possible. I saw machines splitting atoms, algorithms creating worlds, and yet hearts growing colder, emptier. The light dimmed for a moment and I felt something that startled me. Sorrow. Not anger. Not punishment. But the sorrow of a creator watching his children play with the fabric of existence without understanding its sanctity. The message was clear, not in language but in essence. Every discovery without reverence leads to imbalance. Every act of creation that denies its creator distorts the harmony of the whole. I saw the lattice tremble, like a web strained by human pride. One vibration here, a war, a weapon, a lie, sent ripples across the entire field of light. And then the voice whispered almost like a sigh. "Tell them, the equation is love. Without it, the pattern collapses." The words echoed, infinite and final. And in that moment I knew, the warning was not a threat. It was mercy. I didn't want to leave. Every particle of my being clung to that light as if separation would destroy me. In that place there was no pain, no fear, only knowing. I remember trying to form the thought, "Please let me stay." It wasn't desperation, it was longing, like a child begging not to wake from a dream too beautiful to lose. The voice responded, not as thunder, but as stillness that carried infinite weight. "You are a messenger between faith and formula," it said. "Tell them, light remembers." Those words rippled through the luminous expanse, sinking into me like code written into my soul. And then the peace shattered. It began as a tremor, a distortion in the field of light. The radiant geometry folded inward, collapsing in on itself. I felt the vibration of existence reverse, expansion becoming contraction, infinity folding back into flesh. There was pressure, noise, resistance. It felt like being forced through the eye of a needle. I tried to hold on to the light, but it dissolved into static. Then came the violence. A jolt tore through me. Sound returned in a deafening rush. Alarms, voices, the crack of electricity. My chest convulsed. My body gasped, lungs clawing for air like they'd been underwater for centuries. Someone shouted, "We've got a pulse. He's back." The light above me wasn't divine anymore. It was fluorescent, cold, and harsh. The sterile smell of disinfectant replaced the scentless purity of the other realm. Hands gripped my arms, pressing needles, attaching sensors. My skin burned with contact. I wanted to cry, not from relief but from grief. I had been pulled out of paradise and thrown into chaos. They called it a miracle. I called it exile. The months that followed were a blur of recovery and silence. I refused interviews. My colleagues called it trauma, oxygen deprivation, or a classic death hallucination. I nodded, pretending to agree. How could I explain the unexplainable to men who believed only in equations? But the memory of the voice, those words, "light remembers," haunted me. Late one night, long after the others had left, I returned to my lab. I needed to feel something familiar, something measurable. The room was quiet except for the hum of machinery. I recalibrated one of the quantum detectors we used to measure random electromagnetic fluctuations, pure background noise of the universe. Except this time the noise wasn't random. Across the monitor, the data began to align into a pattern, an elegant rhythm repeating over and over again. 1.732. The square root of 3. The same geometric constant I had seen woven through the lattice of light, encoded in galaxies, atoms, and thought itself. I froze. It shouldn't have been possible. We reran the experiment, shielded the sensors, even replaced the hardware. The same number kept emerging, subtle, persistent, like a whisper buried inside chaos. To anyone else it was meaningless. But to me it was the proof I never asked for. A message hidden in the language I understood best, mathematics. The light hadn't just remembered me. It had left me a trace of itself. I didn't publish the finding. The world wasn't ready. Some truths are too fragile for peer review. I eventually returned to teaching. Same lecture hall, same eager faces, but everything was different. I could no longer speak of the universe as an accident. I described it now as a conversation, a continuous dialogue between matter and meaning. When students asked if consciousness was a product of the brain, I told them, the brain doesn't create thought any more than a radio creates music. It receives it. When they asked about death, I smiled softly. Death, I said, is not the end of awareness. It's merely a change in wavelength. Some rolled their eyes. Others leaned in closer. But all of them listened. I told them that science and spirituality were never enemies. They were two halves of the same divine equation. Science is the language God used to write existence. And then I shared the message I had been given. When humanity learns to command light, it must also learn humility, or creation will correct itself. We are now building machines that can rewrite DNA, create consciousness from code, and bend light itself. We stand on the brink of understanding the source, and yet we forget the source. We chase knowledge without wisdom, creation without compassion. So I tell my students, humanity is decoding the software of creation. But if we remove love from the code, it collapses. Love isn't an emotion, it's the stabilizing constant that holds reality together. Remove it and the lattice trembles. The next breakthrough will not come from a collider, nor from a telescope. It will come from the human heart, when we remember that intelligence without empathy is entropy. I used to believe that when the heart stops, everything ends. Now I know the truth. I died an atheist. I woke up a witness.